Chapter 4. New Plans. The sun sank slowly below the horizon, and darkness reigned over the encampment and the ruins of the old castle. The night was lit by 1,000 distant fires from the many villages scattered within the illusory dome. It was still very cold. Every breath seemed to create a cloud of vapour that slowly dispersed into the night air until the next breath. Reyes had a cure for the dark of night. Since he had started to venture out more and more at night, he had found the cat sight spell one of the more useful incantations in his repertoire. He cast it, not only on himself, but also on Gaggara and Quinagoff. Gaggara was used to the effect by now, although it did make her jump at first. Quinagoff, on the other hand, seemed to be very startled by her sudden ability to see. She crouched low, her spear at the ready, as if she was about to attack the next thing she saw. "Calm down," Reyes said, patting her gently on the left shoulder. "It's just a little harmless magic." Quinagoff turned her head round to face Reyes. Her expression looked a little uncertain, perhaps even slightly suspicious, but she stood up straight and took a more neutral, less threatening pose. "There he is," Jenny announced suddenly, her hand pointed outward towards the old mage. Reyes immediately turned his head to look where his sister was pointing. Mangloss hadn't quite reached the castle yet, but he was clearly visible between the holes in the old castle wall. Mangloss was moving very slowly, as if every step he took was tiring. His mage staff took each step before he did. Mangloss was using the staff like a crutch. Mangloss had always been an old man. He had never been all that steady on his legs, and this last week he had clearly taken a lot out of him. In the last few days since Reyes had last seen Mangloss, the old mage seemed to have gained an extra couple of years. Jenny moved almost immediately, meeting him at the entrance of the castle and trying to support him. "Please, my queen," Mangloss protested. He tried to usher her away. "You should not aid one such as I." "Don't be silly," Jenny cooed. Then she put her arms around him, and whether it was seemly or not, she assisted him into the courtyard. Mangloss, now supported in part by Jenny, walked slowly over to the wooden totem that supposedly marked the very centre of the entire encampment. Once there, he lifted his head and looked directly at King Goatee. Slowly, his head turned as he took in the rest of the scene: Reyes, Gaggara, and the third harpy, Quinagoff. Mangloss's head slowly settled back on King Goatee. "My king," he said weakly. He made a small effort to bow before his liege, but it seemed that his body wasn't all that keen on cooperating. "I see that Reyes was successful." "He was indeed," King Goatee replied, concern written all over his face. "Are you sure you're all right?" "I'm fine," Mangloss croaked, belying his comment. "All I need is a good night's sleep, and maybe a few days to fully recover." Quinagoff had a strange expression on her face. She tilted her head madly to the left so that she was all bar resting it on her shoulder. "What's happening, my chief?" She took a step closer to Reyes. "Who is this old wreck? Why is she being treated with so much reverence? Maybe we should kill her. It would lower the drain on our resources." "Mangloss is worth 1,000 of any of us," Reyes said. He felt a little angry that Quinagoff would even suggest such a thing. He had to remind himself that harpies tended to kill the old and the infirm once they could no longer serve the village. "Not you, my chief," Quinagoff protested. "Even me," Reyes insisted. Mangloss smiled. "I suspect I'm better off not knowing what you're talking about. However," he looked up at Quinagoff and said, "I'm sorry, my dear, but this is only temporary." He then reached out with his staff and tapped Quinagoff lightly on the arm. Quinagoff was ready to fight in an instant. She lowered her spear threateningly towards the old mage, her head still tilted, as if she couldn't believe the old mage was really any kind of threat. "Do you understand me?" Mangloss croaked. "Of course," Quinagoff replied. "Good," Mangloss said. "I thought you would feel better if you could at least understand what we were saying." Quinagoff hesitated. Reyes looked on amazed. "Couldn't you have done that for Gaggara instead of the medallion?" Mangloss smiled. "I could have, but the spell will only last for about 50 minutes, maybe an hour. I thought the permanence of a talisman was more useful." "Of course," Reyes commented. "I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking." Mangloss smiled. His head drooped again for a few seconds, and without looking up he croaked, "Well, I'm glad to say I'm finally finished." "Finished?" Jenny cooed, worried exactly by what he had meant by that. Reyes couldn't help but worry that maybe the old man meant he had effectively worked himself to death. He really shouldn't have expended even the small amount of magic that had been required to cast the spell on Quinagoff. "Yes," Mangloss tried to lift his head, but he failed. "The spell is cast. The enchantment should hold indefinitely. The people of Damothe are now safe, and I can take some time off Still have a lot to do, but I'm sure no one will begrudge me a short break. I certainly won't, the king agreed. At least until someone casts a counter spell, Jenny commented. Yes, agreed Mangloss. Perversely, a spell to counter the illusion would take no more than a minute to cast. It would have to be cast from the right place, though, he said, tapping the nearest totem, and it would have to be the right spell. Well, Jenny commented, maybe I can ease your tiredness a little. She rested her hand on each of Mangloss's shoulders and closed her eyes as if she was concentrating. Reyes noticed that Jenny's hands began to glow with a faint blue light. Jenny was pouring energy into the mage. Don't, Mangloss warned her. He turned his head to look at her, but he made no attempt to dislodge Jenny from his shoulders. That does feel good. There were certain spells that should only really be cast in the direst of need, because when the spell ran out, the effect they had eased would bounce back hard. The spell Jenny used to alleviate Mangloss's tiredness was one such spell. By casting the spell, it was likely that Jenny was going to be the one suffering from the side effects. When he next spoke, Mangloss sounded almost rejuvenated. Jenny clearly hadn't taken all his exhaustion, but she had taken the edge off. Now Mangloss could lift his head without effort. Mangloss rounded on King Goatee. He bowed his head slightly, but in reverence, not in exhaustion. He asked, "So, what can I do for you?" The king looked uncertainly at Mangloss. "Come now," Mangloss said, sounding a lot healthier. "You weren't just hanging around in the courtyard, hoping for a chat. What do you need of me?" "Actually," King Goatee replied, "that pretty much is why we're here. Greyforth is apparently off on some mission with Sir Grant. Sir Richmond has disappeared, so that left you. So we thought we'd talk to you. Let you know we'd arrived, and maybe you could get us up to speed on what was happening." Mangloss nodded slowly. "Why me?" "Duke Ganespa is most likely in his room. You should have spoken to him. He's in charge here while Greyforth is away." Mangloss turned his head and patted Jenny on the hand. "That's enough now, dear. You don't want to overdo it, thank you." The blue glow Reyes had seen emanating from Jenny's hands faded and went out. Jenny let her hands drop to her side. Since she had cast a spell and wasn't the recipient, she started to suffer from the side effects the instant she removed her hands from Mangloss. She collapsed to her knees. King Goatee moved quickly. He was by her side in next to no time and helped her back to her feet. "Are you all right, my love?" "I feel more tired than I have in a long time," Jenny commented, smiling weakly. "Lucky you stopped when you did," Mangloss told her. "That spell could have killed you." Jenny looked up at Mangloss. "I didn't think I took that much." "No," Mangloss agreed, "but you took it all in one lump. You should lie down, get some sleep. You may ache in the morning, but otherwise you should be fine." "I do feel as if I could sleep for a week," Jenny agreed. "I've felt a lot like that lately," Mangloss commented. "Then maybe we should all call it a night," Reyes suggested. "The girls back at my village might be wondering what's happened to me now it's gotten dark. I don't think they fully trust humans yet, but I don't think they'll do anything silly." Reyes turned his head towards Quinnigoff and then to Gaggara. Quinnigoff was as ready as she ever was, clearly attentive to every little detail. Gaggara had a bored expression on her face. Maybe he should have asked her to stay at the village and make sure no one overreacted to his absence. "Yes," Mangloss agreed. "We can talk in the morning." He looked at Reyes. "I want to know how things went with the ring." "I'll tell you tomorrow," Reyes grinned. "Before we go, though, I have to ask you, do you know where my brother is?" "Anita told us that he had left early yesterday morning with Sir Grant. She says that we'd had no news since then, and I think she's worried that something horrible has happened to them. Please don't tell me that, having just come back from rescuing my sister, I'm going to have to leave and hunt down my brother too." Mangloss all but grinned. "Anita is overreacting. It's been less than 2 days since Greyforth left. I have no doubt he'll check in when he's ready. Remember, it was at least 2 days after you'd left before you tried to contact me. I'm sure your brother is fine." Reyes felt a little more at ease with Mangloss's assurance. One thing still bothered him though. "Please tell me you didn't go and retake the castle." "It might seem like a relatively soft target, but it's right on the Elven supply route," Mangloss commented and laughed. "Yes, I know. The elves pretty much have to bring their supplies across the border via that castle and then head south along either the King's Highway or the coastal road." Reyes nodded worriedly. He knew that elves could push through the trees, but why go to all that bother when there was a lovely road bisecting the entire country? Mangloss grinned. "Well, all Greyforth is doing is waiting in ambush along the King's Highway. He plans to attack the first supply column that appears and bring the booty back to us. The gods know we could use the food, and any weapons and captures might be useful as well. Sounds good, the king commented. And you're sure Greyforth is safe? I'm sure, Mangloss replied. I can show you if you like. For Reyes and Jenny, the act of scrying a location required the use of a bowl of clear water. Indeed, even for a mage like Mangloss, water was the easiest way to cast a spell, but it wasn't the only way. All Mangloss really needed was a flat surface. The elderly mage waved his staff in the general direction of the wall of the old keep, and it lit up brightly, as if the mage had used a movie projector. To be fair, the image wasn't that clear. The brickwork of the castle was quite visible under the image, the railings and the windows breaking up the image somewhat. One of the railings in particular seemed to give the giant image of Greyforth a metal moustache when he first appeared. Greyforth moved though, and the moustache didn't. The Duke seemed to be healthy enough. He was walking through a part of the forest that Reyes didn't recognise. Reyes assumed it wasn't far from the King's Highway though, as there would be no point in Greyforth lying in wait in the middle of a thick forest. Reyes watched as the projected image of Greyforth sat down by a fire. He said something, but the image didn't come with sound. The man he had spoken to sat across the other side of the fire and seemed to be laughing at the Duke's comment. Then another man, a soldier in the livery of the Lamington militia, approached the Duke and offered him a plate of meat. The sight of all that food made Reyes' stomach rumble and his mouth water. He wondered if his hunters had caught anything yet. It was dark, so they should be back by now, even if they had returned empty-handed. As you can see, Mangloss commented, Greyforth is still alive and well, as is his champion Knight Sir Grant. Reyes nodded. He was satisfied that for now, at least, both his brother and Anida's father were still alive. The image on the wall died suddenly, and the courtyard of the old castle became very dark. It's a shame he's not here, King Goatee said. It would have been nice to get his input on how we can fight back. My brother is fighting back, Jenny commented weakly. I didn't mean to suggest he wasn't, King Goatee said somewhat defensively. All I meant was that now that I'm here, it would be nice to discuss our options. How can we hit the elves? How can we take back our country? We have 7,000 soldiers, Mangloss said. 5,000 of them are loyal to Duke Greyforth. The other 2,000 were brought by Duke Ganespa, and any plan we come up with that requires their use will no doubt have to be... Mangloss paused and looked up at King Goatee. Forgive me, my liege, I forget who I'm speaking to. We have 7,000 soldiers, all totally loyal to you. King Goatee nodded. Then we need to hit back. Perhaps we should start recapturing some of the nearest cities. The nearest city is Lamington, Reyes offered. When Gaggara and I flew close to it, there was nothing left but a large pile of ashes and a few ruined facades. Gone, Gaggara agreed. What about Lindholm? King Goatee suggested. It's the capital of Carlis and will strike a heavy blow at the heart of the elven invaders. Mangloss shook his head slowly. The city has walls and we have no siege equipment. We could lose our entire army trying to take the place. Even assuming we did take it with minimal losses, we don't have enough soldiers to defend the place against an elven counterattack and continue the campaign. We would be bogged down. We have no siege equipment, King Goatee pointed out, walking over to Gaggara and resting a hand gently on her shoulder. But we do have harpies. Gaggara looked suspiciously at the king's hand, but she made no attempt to remove it. Good idea, Mangloss said. We send the harpies in first, and they will occupy the elves on the walls long enough for the rest of the army to get in. Maybe they can break into the gatehouse and lower the drawbridge. The king nodded. Sounds good. Reyes shook his head adamantly. No. My girls are willing to help you retake your country. We will fight beside you, but we won't fight for you. I won't have them throw their lives away on a pointless enterprise. Now, Sir Reyes, the king gave Reyes a determined, even slightly angered look. What? Reyes said. You think you own me just because you gave me a fancy title? Who do you think you are anyway? Quinnigoff said, looking menacingly at the king. So you're the ruler of some small country. Well, my male is the chief of a village, a harpy village at that. He has more nobility in his tail than you. Quinnigoff, please, Reyes insisted. Let me handle this. Yes, my chief, Quinnigoff said. She lowered her head as if she had been chastised. King Goatee looked worriedly at Quinnigoff for a moment, and then he looked at Reyes. So what can we do? Do we just sit here and wait until an elf stumbles through one of the pillars and discovers us? Maybe one of your turncoat harpies will report our presence to the elves. Or maybe we'll just starve to death. That will happen eventually, Mangloss agreed. Maybe not for a few months, maybe not for a year, but sometime the food is going to run out. We don't have a lot of room here, and we have no land to grow crops on. If Greythorpe keeps sending out raiding parties to attack the supply wagons, then we might survive a little longer, but there are too many mouths to feed. We need to choose a target, Kingote said. We need to hit the elves where it hurts. Let them know we won't go down without a fight. There's a lot more going on in this war, Jenny commented, sounding very tired, than just a grab for land. There's a powerful mage hiding somewhere in the wings. He's behind everything that has so far transpired. Perhaps our main focus should be on finding out who this mage is, and maybe dealing with him somehow. Sir Richmond has already gone to Elistran in an attempt to find and assassinate the Elven Emperor, Mangloss commented. Maybe that will shake them up enough to loosen their grip on our lands. Jenny shook her head. This isn't the Emperor's war. It isn't? Mangloss sounded a little surprised. The Emperor is just a pawn to this magician, Kingote explained. Arlis, Reyes commented. He looked at Mangloss and then at the king. I think we'll find the reason for the elves' invasion on the island of Arlis. What do you mean? Kingote asked. Reyes took a step forward. The city of First Town has been emptied. The entire population of the city has been loaded on boats and transported across to the island. That isn't all. When Gaggara and I were passing through Lufton, we saw evidence that the elves were transporting everyone between the ages of 12 and 50 to First Town to await their turn on the boats. If we wait too long to react, the population of the entire country might end up on Arlis. Whatever the elves are up to, the key to it is on Arlis. Then I guess Arlis is the target, Kingote said. He shrugged his shoulders. How do we get there? We can't just march 7,000 soldiers through the country occupied by elves. We'd be lucky to reach Lemais. If we had ships, we could head for the coast, Jenny suggested. The elves have a huge fleet ferrying people from First Town to Arlis. Even if we had ships, we wouldn't stand much of a chance. Reyes rebuffed her. We have to do something, Kingote commented. Mangloss nodded. He hummed for a moment and then said, Let's see if I understand the problem. We can't march an army of humans through elven-occupied territory because the elves would wipe us out before we got within 100 miles of our objective. Even if we did make it to First Town, we can go no further because of the elven fleet. That sounds about right, Jenny commented. What if we flew over? Mangloss suggested. The elves would see nothing more than a flock of harpies on their way to presumably assist the defence of the island. They would fly over the occupied lands and even the elven ships pretty much unmolested, don't you think? Kingote looked at Mangloss in stunned silence for a moment, and then he said, How would you do that? Reyes, Mangloss asked, Do you still have the painting I loaned you? Yes, Reyes replied. The painting of the cartridge suddenly appeared in his hands, and then he offered it to the old mage. Be careful, Princess Alice still resides inside. She ate a piece of sausage at the wedding feast. It was enchanted elven food, Jenny explained. We were hoping you might be able to find a cure for her and all the other victims of elven food, Reyes added. I'll look into it, Mangloss agreed. He took the painting and looked at it, a smile wide on his face. You aren't seriously thinking we can stuff 7,000 troops within the confines of that one tiny painting, are you? There won't be enough room. I mean, you might be able to get 1,000 in there, but even they would feel crushed, standing in strict lines, toe to toe. By the time we got to Arlis, they would be in no fit state to fight. We'd have no cavalry either. No room for the horses. Not this painting, Mangloss replied. This was just a place for me to sleep. It was a small cottage of my own where I could rest undisturbed. Then to Reyes he said, I hope you found it useful. Very, Reyes replied. No, not this painting, Mangloss explained. But I was thinking we could do something similar with the entire encampment. It will take some time. But now that I'm finished with the illusory barrier, I may have that time. I might even be able to use some of the same totems I used for the barrier. I'll have to see about that though. I don't want to put the barrier at risk. You plan to put the entire encampment inside a painting, Jenny said, amazed. It'll take time, Mangloss said. The cottage took me a week and it's less than an acre. We're talking about something in the region of 300 acres, maybe more. It's not something I'll be able to do overnight. How long do you think it will take? Kingote asked worriedly. At a conservative estimate, Mangloss replied. I'd say a few months at least. I doubt there would be anything left of the country by then, Kingote said. Mangloss shrugged his shoulders. It's the best I can offer. If you can come up with a better idea, I'm sure you'll act on it. Kingote sighed, nodding. Do it. He looked around at Reyes. I don't know if Arliss is the key to this war or not. If there's a chance the mage behind this war is there and we can catch him with his breeches down, then we should go for it. I don't see we have any other options, Jenny offered. At the very least, we might be able to rescue a lot of their slaves, Reyes suggested. Enchanted slaves, probably, Jenny commented. Maybe Mangloss will have the cure by then, Reyes suggested. In the meantime, I need to see Sir Grant as soon as he gets back from his mission with Greyforth. Reyes, are you returning to your village for the night? I thought I would, Reyes replied. They'll expect me there. Besides, I'm hungry, and they should have some food cooking by now. Actually, it occurred to him that he'd be there now, if he'd left when he first intended. Good, the king commented. Then, as you pass the eastern exit, would you be kind enough to tell Anida that I want to see her first thing in the morning? What do you have in mind? Reyes asked. If I understand Mangloss correctly, King Goatee said, we're going to have a few months before we can hope to strike back. We might as well make use of that time. I'm hoping we can bolster our army with some properly trained peasants.